You know, recently someone I would never vote for and never have said guns are not the problem. And this is going to come to shock to some of you. I agree. Guns are not the problem. But you ever noticed how those types of people never follow up with what the problem is? People are the problem. Gun violence can be divided up into three categories. And we don't often talk about how it can be divided up into three categories because that would make it easier to deal with. It would make it more simple to have conversations about. Right? There are three categories. We're going to talk about third one after I tell you the three categories, and then I'm going to do a couple more videos where we talk about the other two. Because like I said, we're going to try and keep these in 15-minute bites for those of you with short attention spans. The first one, of course, is the one we see on TV a lot, which is criminal violence, right? We see that a lot on TV, but it's really not as big of a factor. So when I say criminal violence, gang shootings, gang warfare, robberies, things like this criminal element, that can be subdivided, but we'll talk about that in a different video. Then we have the second factor for gun violence that occurs, which is family, stalkers, people that know people. They get into this tiff, they get in these arguments, and that kind of gun violence erupts between two people that know each other. Okay. And that's another category. And then we have the mass shootings. They're not related to those other two issues. They can be indirectly and muddled in. So when we fail to divide these out, they become this giant, unimaginable, hard to deal with. But we're going to pull these three apart. And the third one is the mass shootings. The mass shootings have two things in common. The first thing they have in common, whether they are school mass shootings or they are mass shootings, adult mass shootings, the first thing they have in common is the weapons were originally obtained legally. We can easily argue that a child who steals the guns from his parents or his family members didn't illegally obtain them. We can also make the argument that a child who takes guns that are not properly locked up because the parents or the family members are irresponsible and do not keep those guns locked up properly should be held accountable. In the case of the Michigan shooter who is now doing life in prison with no parole versus his parents who have now been charged and agreed to 4-year prison terms. Let's be clear. From my point of view, those parents are more culpable than that child was. And to me, those two should be serving the life prison without parole. And he should be serving longer than 4 years. But let's say he serves a decade in a mental institution where he gets the help he needs. Deprograms him from the damage that those parents did. Because something made him that way. And certainly, arguably, those parents who even took off and ran knowing they were going to be charged as the first parents to ever be held culpable. They were not good parents. He deserves a chance at a regular life. They don't. They were the adults. And in school shootings, 74% of the guns come from family members that legally obtained the weapons. 64% plus, almost 65%, came from the parents. Seems like a simple fix. Hold people accountable for not keeping their weapons up. And if they do not keep them locked up, that if their children commit a crime, they are going to be held at the same standard, not just as accomplices, but as actual perpetrators, because they enabled it. The second factor that these guys all have in common, because we can't deal with the adult males because most of them don't have any reason not to have a gun, or they wouldn't have been able to legally obtain it, right? So now we got to go into the second factor that these mass shootings all have in common. 96% plus, depending on where you read, anywhere from 90 to 99%. And depending on whether we're talking about just adult version or school version. No matter what, 96% of all mass shootings in this country are committed by white men. I was shocked. 96% or more. Now, when you think about that, I want you to think of white as the census defines it, as the federal government defines it, as your state government defines it. And that means white includes Jewish men, Middle Eastern men, and white Hispanics. Anyone who self-identifies as white male. The majority of them are Caucasian male of European descent. Nobody would argue that was not Caucasian. But 34% of the population accounts for more than 96% of the mass shootings. When we look at the manifesto of any of these guys that have one, it's always they're victims. They think the world is falling apart and they are victims of someone. The Las Vegas shooter was a victim of casinos, not his gambling problem. Casinos, right? One of the Army shooters, he was bullied. A lot of the school mass shooters, they were bullied as kids. Bullied by their parents, bullied by other students. There's commonality there that they seem to all feel like they were victimized. 34% of the population is top of the heap, right? Founding fathers, before the founding fathers, white Caucasian men have ruled everything. All the way to present, basically. Right? It's only been 50 years since women can have a bank account on their own. It's only been a little over 50 years that 25% of the states in this country allowed a woman to not be discriminated against if she applied for a job. We still don't get equal pay. So what has changed for white men? At the top of the heap all along, right? What has changed for that 96% plus mass shooters? What has changed for the 34% of the population they come from? Well, this is my opinion. And it is based on reading a lot of psychology and reading a lot of the excerpts of all of these manifestos and or the studies on these guys. They see themselves as here, and they feel like they have been diminished. And I know Caucasian men in this country, they do feel confused, and you have a right to feel confused. The world is changing. This was where you were at in the world. And now you feel like the ground is shifting. And a lot of times we talk about the ground leveling out. So you feel like the ground is shifting underneath your feet. And you're coming down and being leveled out with everybody else so that everybody's on a level playing field. And that's the visual we give you guys. And most of you are okay with it because you're like, I was never on top of the heap anyway. All right? But there's a very small percentage of you that feel like you're owed that top of the heap. And all of us know one of those guys, at least one of them, right? I mean, most of them are harmless. But we all know guys like that. Why is she getting the job? oh, he got hired because he's a minority, right? And there's a difference, and I want to explain. It's a psyche difference. It is a societal psyche difference. White men have always been in this pedestal here, this top of the heap. Minority men grow up their entire lives knowing that they're not the top of the heap, that they could run into the wrong person, they could have the wrong altercation, they could be in the wrong place at the wrong time. They know this. And they grow up knowing this. And women grow up with the same fear. I don't care what color you are. We all grow up with the, don't go here at night. Don't go anywhere by yourself. Stay in well-lit areas. Carry your keys between your fingers. Carry a can of mace. Carry a taser. Take a self-defense course. Yeah, women all know that we're not the top of the heap. So, Caucasian men have this view, and we've used it in our own language. The other side has used it in their language. So it's misleading to the side, and it really helps kind of egg the nonsense over here where we ignore the people problems and just blame the inanimate objects. The ground is shifting to you. And for some of you that have mental issues, not the mass majority of you, but for those that have mental issues, as the ground is shifted, you feel like you're sinking and you're losing everything. And some of the guys I know still do. I mean, even when they've got everything, they still feel like, I don't know what to say. I don't like not knowing what to say. I don't like the idea of me getting blamed for every guy that's ever raped a woman, it's one-off rapes. And I've tried to explain to people, it's not the one guy. It's not every one guy. It's one guy goes nuts and he rapes 200 people. One guy goes nuts and perches himself up in a Las Vegas hotel and shoots at thousands of people at a concert. One guy. It's not all of you, but all of you, I think, almost all of you, can empathize with this idea of the ground shifting under you and not knowing what is okay and what isn't, because you've always been up here. Who cared? You could say whatever you wanted. Everybody had to kind of capitulate, shake their heads and roll their eyes and put up with it. And now all of a sudden you can't get away with that anymore. So all of you feel like it a little bit. And even those of you that don't feel like it, that recognize it 100%, you know what it feels like. You know what they're talking about. You just don't agree with them when they say, well, I don't understand. But I want you guys to think of it in a new way. And I want you to teach your kids it in a new way. It's not that you guys are falling down the heap. Think of yourselves more in a pedestal. And everybody else has been in this gully that's filling with water. And they're in boats or on platforms that are floating. And they're being raised up to the same level as you. You're not losing anything. Everyone else is just coming up to the same level as you. If we started looking at it from that perspective, and I actually had an old white engineer explain this to me, and I thought he was spot on. I've thought about it for a couple years plus now, and he was spot on. Other people are being raised to the same level. We're still not at the same level. Women aren't paid as much. Hell, we've just gotten reminded that women aren't allowed to get IVF without their husband's approval. Women can't have a tubal litigation in more than half the states in this country now because Roe flipped over and a woman needs her husband's permission to get a tubal. Crazy, just crazy. A man can go get snipped without his wife's approval. So don't tell me how you guys are the victims. You're not. But you feel like it. And I understand why you feel like it, because we keep telling you that you're leveling down and you want to level up. But you're not leveling down. We're all just finally catching up with you. And we're not even near caught up. Women still make less than 80 cents on the dollar, and that's if you're a white woman. Minority women make 60 cents on the dollar to a white male. That's facts. I know a absolutely magnificent black woman with her master's degree who does a job that most of the people that used to do that job or do it in other companies don't even have a bachelor's degree. The company she works in, they have bachelor's degrees. But she's smarter. She should be a manager. She could easily be a manager. What holds her back? The stereotype of women. Add on the stereotype of black women. You're not leveling down, fellas. We're all just trying to level up. You're still up here. You've never fell down, never come down off of there. So this idea that somehow everything's shifting underneath your feet, I get it. We've told you that that's what's happening. Because we keep saying, oh, everything's leveling out. Everything's leveling out. And you feel like you're coming down as everything levels out. No. Everything else is raising up. And that's the reason I think 34% of the population accounts for more than 96% of the mass shootings. Because while it's a very tiny percentage of white men, they still feel like the ground is shifting underneath them and they don't understand. And they need somebody to blame for it shifting. How do we fix that? Well, the only way we fix it is as a society. We have to stop teaching kids. And a lot of them still are learning this. That somehow being, you're not going to tread on me, you're not going to hurt me, you're not going to do that to me. Nobody's hurting you. Nobody's screwing with you. Nobody even has the opportunities you do from the freaking starting gate. Everybody else is starting as a lame horse compared to the 34% of you. I don't mean that in a mean way. It's just facts. And I don't mean to say, well, I'm owed something because I'm starting as a lame horse compared to you. What I mean is we as a society need to stop coddling the ones with the mental health issues. And the truth of the matter is the mass majority of you probably realize, everybody else is just leveling up. And that you started at the top of the game. A friend of mine, when we talked about this, said, but what about financials? You're right, what about financials? But that's a separate issue. Mass shootings. Mass shootings only. 34% of the population produces 96% plus. This isn't just because of them being able to legally obtain weapons. This is a societal issue where we have convinced people who started at the top that they are being victimized because they think they're sinking. You're not sinking, fellas. I know you feel that way sometimes, but you're not. Giving other people an equal shot is not you losing. It's not the same thing. Think about it. Peace.